Battle of the Network Shows now begins its programming day. Battle of the Network Shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to another episode of Battle of the Network Shows, you hosers. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone.
And today we're going to be talking about the sketch comedy show from Canada, SCTV.
Yes, it is SCTV, or is it Second City Television, SCTV 90, SCTV Network 90. I'm going to say right off the bat, Mike, that I'm totally baffled by all this, and I don't understand it.
I don't really either, especially when you get into Series 4, Cycle 2, which I believe the episode we're going to talk about comes from that period.
Yeah, I'm perfectly willing to just call it SCTV, and hopefully that's good enough for everyone, because that's what I've known it as, and
Right.
it may have the most convoluted production history of anything that we've done so far.
Yeah, it is kind of baffling and overwhelming, which in an entertaining way the show is.
Yes, that's right.
So it's fitting. But yeah, I want to say this one's been on our minds for a while to do. Was it a poll once?
I believe it is. I think when we did Saturday Night Live, it was in a poll with SCTV and Fridays.
Yes, yeah, that's right. We've been wanting to do it, and I know for me recently, like maybe in the last year or so, just clips from it started coming up on YouTube a lot. Or at least I watched one, and then that led to many others popping up, and so it had been on my mind again because of that. So I'm glad we're doing it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you weren't getting Pink Lady and Jeff clips popping up in your YouTube feed suddenly.
I'll leave that to you.
I'm not ruling that out for the future.
The
distant future, maybe.
Only if we can get Mark Evan here to come on. So my experience with SCTV, like I feel like I know the show, and yet I feel like I have a very limited experience with it. I certainly wasn't watching it on NBC at 1 a.m. whenever it was on Fridays. And my first connection with it is odd, which is in 6th grade, some of the boys in my class had seen Strange Brew and were always quoting it. And I had no idea what they were talking about. And because of other words they used, I thought hoser was a bad word.
Ooh.
And it was weird for a couple years, I think. I just didn't know until I saw Strange Brew, and then started to put it together. And then around that same time, I think it went into repeats went into syndication, at least where I lived. So I remember seeing it that way, like my brother and I watching it. And those were probably cut down to half an hour, or the long ones were cut down and the short ones were the same length, whatever. And then definitely becoming a fan, and of course Rick Moranis had become a star by then, and Martin Short and John Candy, and I enjoyed all of their work to different degrees. And yeah, and my brother, somewhere in there, we joined the Columbia Record Club, and he got the Bob and Doug McKenzie album on cassette.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I might have heard that before I saw Strange Brew. I'm not sure. And then, over the years I've seen it either with, our friend Dan. We watched his DVDs a lot. And then NBC was running it again late on Fridays, either in the late 90s or the early 2000s. And I remember catching it a lot that way.
Which has to be one of the most random appearances of a show back on television that I can remember in recent memory. That just seemed totally bizarre to me.
It was like in the later slot, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I saw some of them. So I know a lot of bits, but I don't, even now, having watched some for this, still don't have an entirely full grasp of it. But I like it.
Yeah. It's odd for me. I have a similar experience in that I do remember how popular Strange Brew was. I don't think I was that into it at the time, but I do remember friends, and even I think people in my family, I think my dad and my uncles were really loved those characters and thought the movie was funny. I think I might have seen the movie and maybe even SCTV on like pay cable. I know Cinemax was one of the homes of SCTV in the '80s, and I think we had that pretty early. So I think I might have seen that somewhere. I didn't see Strange Brew in a theater, but I'm thinking I might have seen come across it on pay cable, and it was just something like I didn't really get much into SCTV until probably like the '90s. I think I was looking up, kind of like we said, the long tangled, especially post first run history of it, and I think I remember it being on like comedy, the early versions of like Comedy Central and the Comedy Channel, and kind of digging it a little bit more into it. I think what I knew most about SCTV at the time, like in the '80s, was the characters like Bob and Doug Mackenzie and that Great White North thing, and maybe like Sammy Maudlin, those kind of things. Whereas now, or over the years, I've come to appreciate more like the straight on parodies of television and show business, and I think that's what I enjoy more. At the time, though, it was more like, okay, there's this kind of like other weird show that John Candy came from, and it was more like the show where other people came from as opposed to a show that I watched at the time. But now, though, I wonder, as I'm kind of going through this, is there's like the episode we're going to talk about is more of a themed episode, but I'm wondering, well, maybe like kind of this by sketches approach. This is one show where maybe it's not so bad, as heretical as this may sound, to watch it as a bunch of skits on YouTube. Like unlike Saturday Night Live, SCTV didn't have guest hosts every week, and the format was differently. So I think maybe that's one reason, and plus like the way it was chopped up in syndication, that you don't necessarily associate. You might know like a theme episode, but as far as like with Saturday Night Live, we were like, okay, what should we do? Like the episode with George Carlin hosting, or the episode where Mr. T guest hosted like this. Where SCTV, it's more like I think maybe people remember the characters and the sketches, but not so much the full episodes, with the obvious exception of some of the concept episodes. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe we even discussed that early when we were thinking about this, but of just picking a bunch of sketches, but then that seems daunting too. But I think two things. One, like you said, the parodies are quite good, and then the characters. Like I in prepping, watched some interviews with people, and then I actually happened to watch a Martin Short interview as part of the TCM Film Festival, where he mentioned this too, that it was a more character driven show than SNL in the sense they were more just invested in the characters, and I think probably because they wrote it all before they filmed it, instead of they weren't on that live treadmill that SNL's on. They were able to explore that a little more. But when I think of sketches we could have done, or was looking at episodes or getting suggestions, it's like there are things not in this that I would have loved to have talked about, like the 3D movies with Count Floyd, and unfortunately we only get a fake ad for those.
Right.
And I guess some of the I know there are some other ones, but the parodies are great, and I think we could have gone that way, but we decided to go with an episode instead. I mean, there's so much in it
Yeah.
that I think we cover all that ground. But
And I think I'm glad for the podcast here that I like, whenever possible to look at an episode like as it aired in its context. So I'm glad we're doing that. I do think like as I watch more SCTV, I'm probably going to lean more towards just like watching some of the individual segments and stuff. It's interesting to me, like another big difference is I think SNL is fascinating to me because of it just has that cultural importance. So you sort of tie it in with what else was going. It was topical. It had like the hosts, and the music was such a big part of it. And SCTV is not like that. It's sort of it doesn't have all the obvious backstage drama. There's not that. It's not as topical.
as apparently everyone liked each other.
Yeah, yeah. So there's not that whole mythology about it. Yet when I watch, so if I want to watch Saturday Night Live, I'm not interested in watching like skits on NBC. I get irritated. I want to watch the whole episodes and see them. Whereas SCTV, though, just watching those segments, they make me laugh out loud. A lot of these old segments, like now. So I think the show, like in a certain sense, is funnier. Like the best moments of SCTV are a lot funnier to me than the best moments of Saturday Night Live. Yet I just feel more of an attachment to SNL for those reasons I talked about. It's kind of a weird thing. But as far as if I'm just going to pick out a bunch of skits, I'd say probably like the top 20 moments from SCTV are probably just more purely laugh out loud funny than like the best of Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, I think, and their focus seems to just have been on being funny. Like, I mean, one of the sketches here is vaguely political, which is a little bit surprising in a way. And there are things that reference the '80s or something, but it's they're a lot of times parodying very old movies and old TV and stuff, and some of that stuff wouldn't be funny to everyone. But in one of these interviews I watched with Martin Short, he even made the point that like when they were making fun of or parodying Canadian things, it had an interesting response because Canadians would see it as what they were parodying, and Americans would just see it as some weird character they'd made up.
Wow,
So it
that's
still
interesting.
worked, but he mentioned some character by specifically that someone who did interviews or something, and that being
Oh,
based on a Canadian person, but not someone that we would know.
yes, it's funny because I was watching one of those and I had no idea that it was a real person, and I forget how I discovered it, but I was like, oh my gosh, she's basing this like Brian something, but I was like, wow, that's actually a real like well-known Canadian personality. It worked on its own kind of, but it was amazing to me that was like, oh, whoa, I had no idea. Another thing is Saturday Night Live. Like I was too young at the time to know this directly or anything, but that was supposedly, by all accounts, a big product of and reflection of the drug culture of the time. Whereas SCTV is just not associated with that directly at all. And so Saturday Night Live was maybe more self consciously edgy, or just maybe even not self consciously, but it was edgy and introducing more like kind of shocking things and taking advantage of its late night time slot and trying to do things that people hadn't seen before. Whereas, like you said, SCTV, as you said very well, was more concerned with just being funny.
So in terms of the origins of it, one I don't know why I had never thought about like exactly when it was on, but I was surprised at how I was surprised that it started in the '70s for some reason, and really only a couple years after SNL. And then I was watching something. It was I'm sure it was like originally a DVD feature or something. But looking back at the origins of it and talking, that Second City, Toronto, one of the reasons they started the show was because they didn't want any more of their actors to be poached by SNL or some other American show that came along to compete with it because they had already lost Gilda Radner and Dan Aykroyd, and they had all these talented people.
Yeah.
So they did that with a very low budget to start with, and brought in Harold Ramis to kind of run it, I guess, for the first couple seasons. But and then it went through this tangled web of different financiers and different places of filming, and then NBC got involved, and I mean, I guess those early seasons were syndicated here too, which I didn't realize. And then they lost their syndication, so they almost were done after the end of the second season. And then they got this other guy came in and had facilities, and they filmed it in Edmonton that year. And then the NBC thing happened. So it's a very strange, just beginnings even.
It is, and I think even that sort of murky early history points to maybe one thing that kind of worked against it a little bit. Saturday Night Live has a clear origin and a clear linear history, and obviously it's still going. But even if it had gone off the year, even if it had ended like in the '80s, you would have that origin and like the clear vision of like Lorne Michaels and that sort of that mythology built up around him. Whereas SCTV, it's not so clear. It bounced around a little bit, and I think it's another reason that maybe it's more like people that maybe like comedy aficionados and TV aficionados know it more, but it's not as well known or widely distributed as SNL is.
Yeah, and I guess even back then it was a big like comedy. People loved it, like people who worked in comedy. But yeah, didn't always have great ratings, of course. And it has those origins. I feel like we've brought this up before. Second City, Toronto, like a lot of those people had been in this production of Godspell together that just about everyone was a big deal in, and Paul Schaefer
Yes.
worked on. It really is nuts. And that when you're talking about SNL, for some reason it made me think of like SCTV. I almost think of like a band. I mean, they had some members come and go, but there is this core group that's there the whole time, like Joe Flaherty and Andrea Martin, especially, and Eugene Levy briefly left, but then he came back, and Catherine O'Hara briefly left, and John Candy briefly left, but they all came back, and then Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis left, but Martin Short came in, so there's a different sort of consistency, I guess, but also in a band in the sense that it was a group of people with a shared goal, and they weren't competing with each other in the same way that like SNL is almost like a collection of solo artists
Hmm.
having to work together or something.
Yeah, and part of the legend of SNL is the competitive atmosphere.
Yeah.
probably especially after the first 5 years, but just competition to get things on the air, competition to win Lauren's affection and things like that. And I don't really see that about SCTV.
No, I feel like they all owned the show, like they
Yeah,
were felt ownership of the show.
and I guess a lot of them were writers, so it wasn't like they were trying to curry favor with writers or forcing. It wasn't like the only way they could get on the show was to write themselves, some killer material. They were all like writers and performers, and
And all playing a zillion characters. So,
yeah,
I mean, we have things here where Joe Flaherty's like 3 characters in one scene or something.
yeah,
Uh, it's that's a lot of fun. But although one of the things I watched, Catherine O'Hara and Andrea Martin said, and maybe this changed at some point, but at least at first they were the only people not paid to be writers
Hmm.
because they were women.
yeah,
Even though they were writing too, or at least Andrea Martin made it seem like she wasn't really writing a lot, but still, that part's a little strange. And then they had some other writers working behind the scenes. Martin Short's brother was when he was on. And another thing about it, like all of these people are still, with the exception, of course, of John Candy and Rick Moranis by choice, but they're still working a lot in different
yeah.
capacities. It's, I mean, Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara are having their, you know, late career star turn right now, or just did. But Eugene Levy was the go-to character guy in comedies for 20 years before that.
Hmm.
And of course, Martin Short is Martin Short, and John Candy was John Candy, and but they all work. And Dave Thomas is writing dramas, and
Yeah,
says something about them, I think.
it does, and like it was a good it was a good fit. I guess just things worked, and the atmosphere was different, and they didn't have like the pressure cooker, which for SNL it seems like it took its toll on a lot of people in SCTV. It seems like people came out of that for the most part pretty well. Although I think it's still fair to say, just because it's such a good show, that this was the creative peak for many of them. But hey, good for them just to be around 40 years later and still kicking. That's great.
Right. We asked a friend of the show, Dan, for some ideas for an episode to do. And he gave us many, many suggestions. The one he sort of landed on was the one called CCCP1, where Russians interrupt the broadcast of SCTV, and you get a bunch of Russian TV, and that stuff is very funny. But then he had also mentioned this one by, it has a guest star, and by that character's name, and we ended up picking that instead. I think maybe it seemed like a slightly better fit, and it definitely, I mean, I guess every episode comments on TV a little bit, but this seemed to comment a lot, and I think, for me, at least near the end, it hit a lot of things that we like. I could be wrong about that, but one character in particular who is a nice surprise.
Huh. Well, I think it enables us to cover a little bit more of the show, but just because it's longer, I guess.
Yes.
Right. It's from the 90-minute era, and it just has a lot of stuff in it, and a lot of characters and types of performances. So
Yeah, part of the Russian one, because of the most of the broadcast is being interrupted, you don't get a lot of the regular characters, and maybe a little too much Guy Caballera, at least for my taste. So this one is called, I've seen it referred to as Zontar, or by the guests who are on it too. But it is from the fourth season, Cycle 2, from
yes,
October 1981.
yes, I actually have an exact air date on this one. It premiered October 30th. 1981. So this was in that period where it was on Friday nights on NBC. And the time slot, so it would be after the Johnny Carson Tonight Show. And it replaced Midnight Special. And I didn't know this, but I guess they were in kind of a bind, like the Midnight Special suddenly leaving. And that's one of the reasons they went to this, I guess. But would you like to know what else was on late night on this particular Friday night?
So they just didn't even air Letterman on Fridays at the time.
Yeah, which they went a long time like that, I guess. It was just right from the get go. He was like a 4 night a week thing. Although he wouldn't have started yet, right? Yeah. That's right. The 81. This was still Tom Snyder would have been on at 12:30. But right before this was Tonight Show with Michael Landon, Steve Landisberg, Sheena Easton, and Tanya Roberts listed. I'm not sure if she actually got out on the set, but Sheena Easton and Michael Landon were the headliners on that.
With the first two guests, that sounds like Johnny Carson regulars to me.
Yeah, Landon was on there a lot.
Yeah.
It seems like, but I don't. He was really one of NBC's biggest stars at the time. I don't know if that's the reason, if he was, or nobody forced anybody on Johnny Carson, I'm sure, but I guess they got along pretty well. If Carson didn't like having him on there, he wouldn't have been back, even if he was NBC's biggest star, you'd think. ABC had Fridays. It showed, we mentioned earlier it was in that poll several seasons ago, but this is an interesting combination. Fridays, another sketch show, of course, late night, and sort of another, it dealt with the drug culture, quote unquote, in a more ham-fisted way, even than Saturday Night Live ever did. But a stark contrast to SCTV. Plus, I think everybody would agree, was much more uneven. But they did have a guest host and musical guest, so it was a much more conventional kind of sketch variety format than SCTV was. But it had Marty Feldman as the host and Manhattan Transfer as the musical guest. The combination there.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know Marty Feldman was a comedy legend, but
Yeah.
it still seems weird.
I mean, and one thing I think Fridays was known for was, a pretty hip, a lot of like new wave and punkish kind of musical guests at the time. But Manhattan Transfer doesn't really fall into any of those categories, I would think, in 1981. But
What were they smoking when they booked that?
I don't know. Maybe Marty Feldman insisted on them. Like, the only way I'll do it is if you get Manhattan Transfer on.
I wonder if Marty Feldman was promoting something.
Yeah, it could have been. Could have been. So CBS, this is like kind of in the era where CBS was running what they'd call their late movies, but it would really be like reruns of Quincy or Kojak or something like that. But on this particular Friday night, they had an NBA game, a regular season matchup between the LA Lakers and the Houston Rockets, which the Rockets won by 1 point. I think it was 113 to 112 in double overtime. So this was when the NBA was kind of in its dark, like okay, we're like really Larry and Magic and all that years. So they would have to settle for being on like at 11:30 at Friday nights, and sometimes in taped time slots and everything. So yeah, CBS had basketball, but yeah, so SCT came on at 12:30 after the Tonight Show with this particular episode. And one more note, Mike, on this. I think this is kind of interesting. It's something else that happened earlier in the night on this Friday night. NBC premiered the TV version of Halloween, the original Halloween from 1978, which seems like an odd movie to show on network TV. And I guess they did edit it down, but they also added about just over 10 minutes of footage that John Carpenter was involved with. And I think they shot some footage during the making of Halloween 2, specifically for inclusion in this presentation. I'll include in the show notes. I was reading an excellent blog piece about that first premiere and what an impression it made on a lot of viewers. So I'll link to that. But that was earlier in the night on NBC. They had the big event was, Halloween.
So the extra scenes were just like things like people playing in the park and in the daytime and eating ice cream
Yeah.
and picking flowers.
Yeah. Well,
I remember, I've still never seen Halloween, but I remember there being commercials for it that were terrifying. So,
yeah, I mean, that was a freaky movie. It's very intense, and it seems a little odd to me that it was on broadcast television like this, but hey, it was. And CBS had its Dukes of Hazzard and Dallas kind of lineup, and a couple of Charlie Brown specials that night too, including The Great Pumpkin. So it was a rebroadcast of The Great Pumpkin, and just for kicks, ABC had an American Bandstand 30th anniversary special, which took up, looks like, all of prime time on that night. So
and it was The Great Pumpkin, and then the callers in the house, Charlie Brown.
Yeah, their way of competing against yeah. It was actually Someday You'll Find Her, Charlie Brown, a new premiering special with Charlie Brown trying to track down some woman. Charlie Brown trying to track down a mysterious woman.
Hard-boiled Charlie Brown.
Yes. It was actually some girl he saw on TV, I think, in a crowd or something. I never saw. I've never seen this special, but it premiered, and then Great Pumpkin came on after it. So that's what was going on Friday, October 30th, 1981, and then you get to 12:30, you stay up late, and you get SCTV.
Yeah, and by the way, the other thing when we were kind of looking at episodes was trying to figure out what cast we wanted to see, because there was some different turnover and things, and as much as at least I like Martin Short, and I just figured he's someone people know more, and I wanted to talk about one with Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis. I mean, people know, of course, Rick Moranis became a big star, but I felt like it would be better to talk about at least a slightly earlier. And apparently there are only like 3 episodes where Martin Short crosses over with them before they left the show. So that didn't happen, and then you didn't want to see a particular person for some reason. You mentioned not really wanting to do a Harold Ramis episode.
Well, I've got nothing against Harold Ramis,
Yeah.
But I just think those early... It's not so much a Harold Ramis per se.
Yeah.
But just that those were from the first syndicated episodes of the show that I think are, probably a little bit less memorable than what came later. So
Right,
yes.
yeah.
Nothing against Harold Ramis.
And then there are also episodes with Robin Duke and Tony.
Tony Rosato. Yeah,
And I just don't know much about them, and there's such this classic core that I would rather see as many of them as possible.
yeah. I think of Rosato and Robin Duke, and even Martin Short, to be honest, as Saturday Night Live performers, actually. And I don't think there's going to be too many people disappointed that we didn't choose a Robin Duke episode. Although I'll say this, Mike, and I mean this with affection. I know that there's people in our Facebook group, if we had put it up to a poll, and one of the episodes was a Tony Rosato, Robin Duke era, that they would have just like would rather have heard us talk about that if they had a choice. Just because I think we have people that like us or are interested in stuff that hasn't been talked about a bunch of times, or the more obscure. But hopefully we won't disappoint people as we go into this particular episode. But yeah, you put it well. I think this is a pretty good combination of performers and things going on with SCTV. This particular episode.
All right, and it begins with with a parody PSA. It turns out.
Actually, you know what? I apologize. Can we talk about that introduction for a minute? Because I want to ask you something about this. The introduction this time is an incredibly cheap looking introduction. It's a montage, like little mini montages of the characters that the performers play, followed by like kind of a classic like smile and look at hey, the camera's looking at me, and a smile or a waiver kind of thing. Like, and I was kind of debating with myself. Well, for one thing, it's some weird cheap looking backdrop that they're all in front of. It looks to me like, I mean, you would sort of assume because it's SCTV that it's sort of like a goof, but I don't think so. I think it's like sincere, like, okay, Dave Thomas, and he's actually, although he actually might have had one of the goofiest looks, but Andrea Martin, what do you think? I mean, it looks to me like they're actually doing like a sincere introduction.
Yes, so one of the behind the scenes things, they talked about this, and Catherine O'Hara and Andrea Martin were talking about it, and one making fun of themselves, saying like they were saying they were terrible, but that it was an attempt to show people that they could look like normal people.
Wow, really?
And be attractive.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's excellent.
That when they were shooting those, everyone else was off stage making fun of each other, making fun of the person being filmed. So Dave Thomas's look is like him responding to whatever they're saying off camera. So he's like trying not to break.
So it's a sincere production, but they couldn't help but be influenced by the goofiness of them being together and acknowledging that it's kind of silly.
Right, yeah.
And, just busting each other's chops. Okay, well, I'm really glad I brought that up. I didn't know that.
But it does look, I mean, it looks like SCTV, the fake network, made it.
Yeah, it looks totally low rent.
Yes, which they didn't have a huge budget, I'm sure, even in the NBC era. But yeah, it does really look low rent.
Okay, well, sorry to interrupt it, but I'm glad I did because that was one of the things that was bothering me, or not bothering me, but one of the questions on my mind. Okay, I can relax now that's been addressed. Everything else is smooth sailing from here on out.
So this opening bit is a filmed thing of the butts of couples. I think there might be a throuple at some point of in very tight clothes and touching each other's butts a lot. And then it turns out it's from the American Dental Association telling people to floss.
Yes, and I actually did have another question watching this. Well, I guess what I was wondering was if there was the way it was done. I was wondering if it was a parody of something specific. I think it's probably just like a parody of just sexual content or innuendo in advertising. Just with all the blue jean shots, of course, blue jean ads were certainly guilty of innuendo and everything. But I was wondering if it was a parody of something specific. If so, I don't know what it was. But
I don't remember any flossing ads with sexual innuendo.
Yeah, I guess I was.
Yeah,
I was thinking of blue jean or
clothing
ads.
Yeah, it just seemed like the types of blue jean ads you saw back then.
Yeah,
like Jordache or something.
Right.
Where the logo on the butt is as important as the jeans itself. So yeah, and I mean, if you're somehow unfamiliar with the show, it's set at a fictional network called SCTV or station, and you're kind of getting it's a little bit like the Muppet Show, I think. Then you're getting sort of a broadcast day, but you get a lot of behind the scenes stuff too that obviously you wouldn't be seeing if you were at home watching this broadcast. But so you'll get commercials and PSAs and things like that. And then it goes into a children's show starring Andrea Martin called Mrs. Falbo's Tiny Town. And she seems to be a slightly daffy older lady, but dressed in sort of like a princess out, or not a princess, like I don't know, a Glinda the Good Witch kind of
Yeah, kind of like
outfit.
a fairy or a good witch kind of thing. Or
And it for some it opens with her singing the theme song badly and driving really badly to to the studio, which is like, I don't know why they would show that, but they do. And then she shows up, and there's a bunch of kids, and the letter of the day is G. Then John Candy comes in dressed as a jester, and he's playing Mr. Messenger. And then the day's guest comes out of a Jack in the Box, and it's Dave Thomas as G. Gordon Liddy. So that makes it a little more political than normal, but at the same time, I feel like it's just like they're one of their offbeat impressions. Normally, you wouldn't think of someone doing a G. Gordon Liddy impression.
right, and they do make some like Nixon references and like a couple of things with Jack Anderson, a political columnist at the time, which I think was funny. But
Who is Jack Anderson?
yeah, but it's like references to like common things from like 5 6 years ago. So I agree with you. It's more like I think goofing on G. Gordon Liddy as a celebrity. Just the fact that G. Gordon Liddy is a celebrity is funny, let alone him being on this show.
It leads to him reading a version of Goldilocks from G. Gordon Liddy's corrected fairy tales, which is pretty much just a lot of gun carnage.
Yeah, it's something that I have to admit I sort of flinched a little bit at first.
Yeah.
It's the kind of like this humor about, okay, he's a gun nut, and it's a little bit easier probably to laugh at that in 1981 than it is now.
Yes.
I did so at first, but I did kind of get past that a little bit. I shouldn't say get past it. It didn't bother me as much as the sketch went on, but at first, it's definitely something like, okay, of its time. It's something you wouldn't do now. But G. Gordon Liddy was a well known gun advocate, and that was part of his shtick for years and years, really. And it was kind of funny, just like this really twisted version of the Goldilocks fairy tale.
Right, and using like military precision to just even to go into the house.
Yeah, like drawing it up and planning it. And then when they get in there,
Two people approach from the side and one from the front, and he's got to have an automatic rifle and a pistol. And
right, and the fact that he had to bring backup, in the first place, which is Mrs. Falbo and the messenger. And then it killed me when he was in there and he was worried about the porridge being poisoned, so he had the other two test it before he had some.
and there in the before the story, there was a one kid, Mo, who's like in a suit and like questioning him about the plot to assassinate Allende, and or to not assassinate but to overthrow Allende in Chile. And then it's Jack Anderson stuff. And Mrs. Falbo's like, he's done a lot of things that damaged CIA operations, and I think he should be punished.
Right, and she just does it totally straight faced, and they kind of just thrown in there, which I thought was hilarious.
But then at the end, she asks him what the moral of the story is, and he's like, there's two ways to look at bears. Let them scare the pants off you, or use them to make handsome wall decorations. And he pulls up like a bear head, and all the kids, everyone is just like revolts against that. And that's a bridge too far even for Mrs. Falbo, I think. And
Yeah,
and there's a Haldeman joke at the end.
yeah, because the letter of the day was going to be H.
Yes.
Next time, so he said, "I hope you don't invite Haldeman on." And then I like they just kind of take off. They
Yeah.
like they're fleeing the scene of a crime or something like that.
Right, yeah.
They're making a getaway.
I don't know why she needed to ride home either.
Yeah, I don't get that part of it exactly, but I love the premise. Like, even if I wasn't necessarily laughing out loud during all of this, like there was a show that I watched growing up called Hatchie Malachi. It was this kind of deal where it was somebody that I think she had like a magic wand and everything. Miss Judy was her name, and she was this like genteel kind of host that introduced Tennessee tuxedo cartoons and the like. And this seemed to me this kind of show, but I just love I just love the notion of like the and it wasn't like explained or anything. That's what I love about it. It just her like racing to get to the studio and them showing that, just like the idea that she just like comes out of nowhere, drops in, does this, and then leaves. As fast as she came. To me, that was as funny as just the notion of G. Gordon Liddy being on this kind of show, which was funny in and of itself. So I really enjoyed this one.
And then that takes us into the theme, the beginning of the connecting narrative, I dare say, of the episode. So we're in Guy Caballero. He's the boss of the station, the head of the station owner. He wears a Panama suit and hat, and is in a wheelchair that he apparently doesn't need. And he's on the phone with Grant Tinker because he's just hired Hank Bain, Conrad Bain's brother, to do a sitcom that is a ripoff of Different Strokes. So I was intrigued by this when Dan mentioned it because I was not aware of that Conrad Bain had a twin brother, and that's who's playing Hank Bain. But his real name is Bonar.
Bonar?
Bonar or
Is
Boner?
it Bonar?
I I don't know how to pronounce his name.
I don't either. I'm just
I'm gonna say Bonar because it sounds like Conrad.
okay. Okay. Yeah, probably.
Boona?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I'm really intrigued by this, and
Yeah.
but I guess he played his twin on Maud, right?
Yeah, I feel bad that we didn't go into this in our Different Strokes episode, but
Yeah,
it seems like this is a neglected area of television history. I'm glad we were able to kind of dip our toes into it a little bit with this, but this is hilarious to me. Sadly, maybe this says something about me, but I thought it was funny just that he had a twin brother and that he was here,
yes,
and he just sounded and looked so much like Conrad Bain
I know.
that I think many people could be excused for assuming that it's Conrad Bain playing his own twin brother.
Right? Yeah, that's what if I had just seen it randomly, that's what I would have thought.
I might have thought, well, there's something different about him, but I would have probably shrugged it off.
Because even then, seeing that the name Bonar,
Yeah,
like if it's in the end credits, maybe it was in the beginning credits too, but it's similar to Zontar, so you might think that that's a bit like or it's not Conrad Bain, it's this alien who looks like
yeah, he took this false billing.
right, because then they named him Hank Bain,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and it's a funny little bit, and because Guy Cabrio is being all tough with Grant Tinker, and then it turns out Grant Tinker hung up on him immediately,
yeah.
and he admits it, but. And then after Hank leaves the office, he asks his secretary to get Raymond Burr's brother Waylon Burr on because has an idea for a show called Ironhead.
Now I believe that was comedic license. There is no
Yes,
Wayland.
Waylon Burr. But what a perfect name!
It is. It really is. I wish there were such a person.
Yeah, and then we follow Hank outside to this van that has like a little whirling antenna, and he calls the planet Zontar and speaks to Zontar and tells him he can prepare his invasion. So this is certainly taking a turn. And then after that, and we get to some McKenzie brothers, Bob and Doug, beer drinking, back bacon eating McKenzie brothers.
Yeah, they're just kind of like ribbing each other.
Right, they don't even get. I guess they never really get to the topic of their shows, do they?
Yeah.
But this time they really don't. They're bickering and
These were never my favorite characters on SCTV, and I didn't really get the whole Strange Brew thing. To me, it was like a little of them goes a long way, so they were kind of just in the right dosage here. I was more interested in the fact that, now, is this true, Mike, that supposedly, or is this true that they created it as a response to a request, if not a demand, to put more Canadian content on the original show?
that's what I've heard. Yeah.
And I just love the fact that they took that and just put every Canadian stereotype that they could think of into these and made them these totally buffoonish characters.
Yeah, and I do like I like the way they're playing them drunk or not drunk. Like they seem buzzed.
Yeah, that's a good way to put
They
it.
seem like when you're with someone who's a little bit buzzed, like you can almost see the fog in front of their eyes. So and that Dave Thomas is a little bit more.
Yeah.
And Bob, but not much, but just a little bit. Or he's a little bit dumber. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, once you've seen more SCTV and seen all these other characters, they're maybe not as exciting as they seem, but I enjoy it. But it's short, and then one of my favorite things, and I had seen this isolated in a YouTube clip before, but the first of two movie trailers for sort of unconventional romantic comedies. So this one is called Real with two E's, Real Love, starring George Carlin in a sort of Woody Allen, Albert Brooks type romantic comedy, and he's like doing George Carlin bits the whole time, and it's Rick Moranis.
Yeah, I thought this is brilliant. I mean, his George Carlin is hilarious.
Right, the music, like there's this piano thing that's playing along.
There's these shots of people walking the city streets.
Right, and he's got his first. He's talking to like Catherine O'Hara as sort of a Diane Keaton type, in the fedora and everything, and then he's talking to Eugene Levy as his buddy, and I just for some reason he seems like he's Tony Roberts.
I think that's totally what they were going for. Yeah, and I think it was a really good Tony Roberts.
Right, and he's not. I mean, he's just like maybe a hint more nasally than normal. It's not like anything like a a huge impression, but it totally works.
Yeah.
And he works, he's like an assistant film editor, and then and I like when he's walking with Eugene Levy, he like keeps stopping because he's doing bits, and Eugene Levy's saying, would you walk? You stop
Yeah.
that, and he's like, I can't walk and do the bit.
Yeah. More than anything, he's got that Tony Roberts energy too, and like the kind of things he's saying to them is like the pattern would be straight out of that type of character in the Woody Allen movie. But yeah, Rick Moranis is so hilarious. Just his and the endless gesticulating and
Yes.
the pondering and and picking apart words as he says them, and it just you got to see it.
And then at the end, he seems to have found his soulmate with Andrea Martin. Not only enjoys his bits, but then starts to go off into her own bit.
And this is the kind of thing, to me, it epitomizes the what SCTV does really well. You take an impersonation, but you don't just do Rick Moranis doing George Carlin. You sort of do this like mashup where it's Rick Moranis doing George Carlin doing a Woody Allen movie. So you're sending up multiple things at once, which the sum is even greater than, or the whole is greater than the sum of its parts when they do this stuff. I thought this was great.
We'll come back to it, but they do a different version of it with a different person, and I like that too when they essentially take the same sketch and just rewrite it with a different person.
Yeah,
Like there's, I'm sure you've seen this clip, the like the taxi driver
yes,
ads with people like Bob Hope doing the "Are you talking to me?" and they're all the same. It's the exact same structure, just a different person plugged into it.
Now, here's something. Like, I'm assuming those taxi driver, because I just saw them recently as a compilation. I'm assuming those aired in the same episode,
That's what I assume too. I haven't looked into that.
and I think that's probably actually a better choice to do it and quote get it out of the way in the same episode rather than a sketch show that would just keep doing it like multiple times through the course of a season. It just seems to me like it's better to do it while it's fresh in your mind and be done with it rather than drag it out.
And because it adds something to it, like the repetition.
Yes.
Like even this, just that the second one has the same music because it's funny.
Yeah, you can focus on the similarities more, whereas if you just came back and did it next week, it'd be like, oh, they're repeating themselves doing this again. I think that would be more the effect than doing it twice in the same episode like this, so yeah.
And we get a little tease for the Monster Chiller Horror Theater, but that's later in the week. And then we get a little more of the Zontar story. So it's a frisbee lands on top of the building, and it's supposed to be a flying saucer, and then like some Brussels sprouts appear around it, and then in the next shot, one of them's a cabbage, and it rolls and goes down an air duct into the building. And then there's a scene with Mrs. Prickly, the station manager, Andrea Martin character, and Gus, who's a security guard played by Eugene Levy, who they have a very odd conversation where he's in a very friendly way insulting her.
Yeah.
But then she sort of insults him back, but I mean, he's just saying how terrible she looks.
Right.
But he's I'm just making small talk.
Yeah.
It's an odd. I enjoyed that character. He's got a big mustache, and he's just frankly, I think we've maybe both encountered an odd security person or two.
Yes, that may have happened. I think you're right on that. And I like that he gets into like a big into the weeds with her on like the programming decisions.
Yes. She has to figure out where to program Jimmy the Gerbil, a gangster movie from Johnny LaRue, who's regularly makes bad movies for them, and he's got it all mapped out. He's like shifting shows all around so she can dump it in the SCTV time slot, 2 a.m, and don't think she takes him very seriously.
Right.
It's not a bad suggestion. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, but it does allow her to dump a bad movie. But then she leaves, and the cabbage rolls up to his feet, and he picks it up, and it starts glowing. And then he turns into sort of a zombie type of person, and like this costume guy comes in and asks him to sign in for him, and he starts shooting at him. And then Johnny LaRue comes in, which is John Candy, and he takes him in a closet, and then you hear Johnny LaRue screaming, and they come out, and they're both possessed. And anyone who gets possessed has a cabbage leaf on the back of their head.
Yeah, now in real life, Mike, when somebody gets possessed by aliens,
Mm-hmm.
you can't tell so easily. They don't have a cabbage going out of their head. So it's good that they made that distinction here.
It's good to know that about real life. I mean, it's a little scary.
It is.
Because how do you tell?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So they played it a little broadly here, but, it's understandable for comedic effect.
Yes, just in case you didn't get that the person talking like this and staring was a possessed.
Yes, although apparently some people like within the SCTV universe didn't realize that at first. It looks like.
No, I just thought it was weird.
Yes.
Then we get a commercial for Lifers Only, a album of love songs performed by the Danorama Prison Choir, a male prison choir, we should say, and not the loveliest renditions. But I think I like enjoy the end of it where the warden is addressing the camera, and he clearly has gone from being a prison warden to being like a record industry, a slick music industry guy.
Yeah, and he's sort of addressing the controversy of the first album because this is supposedly a follow up to, I guess, Songs of Defiance or something. And I wondered if maybe there actually was a Songs of Defiance skit before, or I don't know if it's just within this skit that it's referring to that, but it wouldn't surprise me if they had done that before. You know, it's kind of another like K-Tel type commercial with Dave Thomas doing the voiceover, which he's very good at. And I agree with you. I kind of like the four lifers only, I think, was the kind of the funniest part, but I did like that the bit at the end with Joe Flaherty. I thought was the best part.
I did. I was just thinking that I don't know why I had thought of it before, but I did enjoy there are all these visuals of like prisoners and talking like Catherine O'Hara playing a woman, and like while the songs are playing over these little vignettes, and I remember there were record ads that would be like that, right?
Yes, and in this case, they also show 2 to 11-year-old demographic. Cover your ears. Some apparent conjugal visits
Yes,
as a backdrop for this.
right, and it's a fun little bit in there. After the Sammy Maudlin tease, there's the farm film celebrity blow up with Big Jim McBob and Billy Saul Hurrick. And those are characters that have been on, I know are recurring characters, and I believe it started just as a farm report, and then it became them doing movie reviews, and there was a musical episode where they blow up a bunch of musicians, and they like seeing people blow up. And that's sort of their deal.
They do. I mean, to me, again, it's not my favorite part of SCTV. Some of these recurring characters, to me, it's more like a SNL kind of '80s thing where it's like, oh, let's bring this back again. And it is one note, but those characters are it's so funny the way they do them. As long as it doesn't go much more than it does here, then it's fine.
Right. I feel like the fact that they kept finding different ways to do these particular characters is interesting. Like they could have just always had them do film reviews but they kept like upping the game a little bit. Also, there seemed to be no consequences to people blowing up. I think that it's like a Muppet kind of explosion. It's just like,
Yes.
It's amusing because it's there. So they're interviewing Meryl Streep, and then she's never blowed up in a movie before, and they get her to spontaneously blow herself up, which she does, because of course she's Meryl Streep, and
it is kind of funny too. It's like 1981 Meryl Streep, and she's kind of being humble and like demure about not having blown up in a movie before.
Right? Yeah,
That part of it is kind of is pretty funny.
Yeah, and they did a pretty good nose for her, I thought. The fake nose for Catherine O'Hara's Meryl Streepy
Yes.
kind of nose, and I think it's good that it's there because then these guys pop up later in a little funny cameo. I got a kick out of it.
Yes.
And then we get the second movie trailer, and this one is Don Rickles' Love is the Greatest Gift God Gave Us. And I mean that sincerely.
Yeah.
Which he even directed.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is essentially the same structure as the other one, but he's doing Don Rickles material, and he makes a point of making fun of the Diane Keaton character's hat, and then he's walking with Eugene Levy and doing that bit, and then he's sitting with Andrea Martin in the park and doing the Don Rickles thing of which I think he did at the end of the shows, right, as his shows, of being very sincere about people loving each other and all of this.
Right, like doing that little wrap up, and Rick Moranis is very funny here. I actually had seen recently John Candy. I don't know if you've seen this in a skit called UFO Sharky. So he was doing Don Rickles and CPO Sharky essentially, and it was pretty good. I mean, they didn't bother with the makeup and stuff so much, but the voice was pretty funny in the way he was doing things. So it was interesting to see Moranis doing it here. I also think this kind of I was kind of thinking about this when you talked about the scene stealing nose in the previous segment. SCTV didn't have a huge budget with makeup, and it's kind of funny. Like the Rick Moranis as Don Rickles' job is not all that impressive, but to me it makes it more impressive. They really relied on the performers to bring it off, and that was the big thing.
Right. He's got a comb over, a bald cap with a comb over. But and there's something where he says something insulting about Italians, and then he's like, "Oh, did that guy hear me?" And then he's yelling like, something about Sinatra, of course.
Yeah. He does the bit where he's like, if I've ever cheated if I've ever cheated, may God strike me dead. And then and he acts like he's, having a heart attack or something. And then, but it's just that, and like, the way he like recovers, quote unquote, quickly and just is like laughing at it, and acknowledging it and catches up with, I guess it was the Eugene Levy, but little things like that. Another excellent job by Moranis. He might be my MVP of this episode. We might have to think about that later, but strong contender at least.
And then we get a news break, which they did a lot. And I'm gonna mention here that when I watched this as a kid, for some reason the Eugene Levy's character, Earl Camembert, and Eugene Levy's hair at the time really bothered me. I don't know why.
Bothered you? Interesting. Like disturbing or like unsettling.
Yeah, I just didn't like it. I
Mm.
think it was another one of those things that just seemed like the Brady Bunch house. Like I don't know, just something wasn't right. Like he's got the check jacket on, and that was part of it. I think because his hair is so smooth. I mean, it's big, but there's a smoothness to it that. And that's just what I think Eugene Levy's hair was like at the time. He'd grown it out, and so it was poof out like that if he did, or he could comb it that way.
Right.
Because his Bobby Bittman character has that too, and I'm not 100% on board with that character.
Yeah.
But then I've seen a few of these clips, and I enjoy the usual interplay between them. What normally is the Floyd, who I assume is also Count Floyd.
Yes, the character does double duty.
Which is hilarious too. The idea of the straight newsman having to host a
Yeah.
horror show.
Yeah. And I do love Count Floyd, like I think you were saying, and probably maybe my favorite recurring character that isn't in this episode.
Yeah, and the whole Dr. Tongue doing the 3D thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
rocking things toward the camera. So in the normal news things, like he gets all the juicy stories, and Earl gets these terrible stories, like super boring stories, and Floyd seems to actively dislike him. So maybe that's what I was picking up on. That no one likes this guy, so I don't like this guy.
Okay. Well, maybe.
I don't know. Who knows? But he's possessed by Zontar, and his news stories are all Zontar prevails and things like that. And then Earl has a story about a cabbage truck overturning.
Yeah.
But he's like, I don't know, what is this Zontar business? And then the guys in the booth, one of them is already possessed, and then he gets the director, who lets out a very good comedic scream.
Yeah.
And then there's a tease for a show featuring Dr. Tongue and Bruno doing a lesson in screen acting, which sounds hilarious.
Right.
And then we see Hank is getting a bunch of ham radio stuff installed, and he's talking to Dave Thomas or somebody named Bill, and briefly loses his cool with him. And then he gets called to the set of Different Folks. So on the set, they're doing a scene, and he's telling the kids that they can't go and have their friends over for a sleepover, and the kid in the quote-unquote Arnold role keeps like botching the line. Like he says, "What you talking about?" a couple times, and it's supposed to be something else, like just like "Why not?" or something. And then Moranis is playing the director, who's like a total hothead and just yelling at everyone.
Yeah, he's doing his Larry Siegel character, which I think it's funny, and I don't know. I guess supposedly it's based on Joel Silver.
That makes sense.
I didn't know that making fun of Joel Silver, or that his temperamental nature was known or a thing like that early, but
No.
I guess it was.
Was he Canadian, maybe?
Maybe I'll have to look into that, because yeah, I'm not sure that he was. Well, you know what? Even if he wasn't well known enough to be parodied like that, they would do it anyway, I guess. I mean, he's not playing Joel Silver. He's playing Larry Siegel. But that guy is hilarious.
Yes, and he would probably maybe not be working these days.
Correct.
Yes, but in the context of this, he is hilarious. And, I mean, he is being a tyrant.
Yeah.
And poor Eugene Levy's playing some crew guy and just really suffering more of it even than the kid. And then Hank has to go make a phone call. So he's just like, "Oh, we'll just do a single. We'll do a single." And he keeps
Yeah.
making the kid say "Why not? Why not?" Like, do you think that's good?
It is really funny, just this bald-faced ripoff of Different Strokes, and the fact that the kid's botching his line at first and trying to and doing the catchphrase, and he's doing that badly too.
Right.
It's very funny, the whole thing. And this is the reason that Hank Bain is here, though. This was the big showcase show for him, right? That Guy Caballero thought was going to be the big breakout hit, this new sitcom. So there's a lot of pressure on everybody, I'm sure.
Yes. We have I guess it's a extended promo for a show starring Dave Thomas as Ted Gordon, overbooked attorney. And he's an attorney with a caseload that would break a Clydesdale's back.
Boy, this guy's just got too much on his plate.
He really does.
I'm starting to think he's doing a disservice to his clients based on this promo because
maybe
he's always on the run.
Yeah, he's late for his court appearance. He gets a pizza delivered. He put what do you think? Was that tea or fruit punch or what did he put into the water?
Oh yeah. He actually. Again, that was just like a funny detail. He has like a big pitcher and he takes like a packet of something and pours it into there, like to actually like mix a drink while he's like doing all this other stuff.
The pitcher is like the for the judge and the witnesses.
Yeah, that's right. He takes that and flavors the water with whatever he's got. Trying to and he keeps asking for like his things are to ask for like a continuance or to have the last X number of minutes be reread to stall for time. I thought this was very funny, actually. It's
ridiculous.
It's kind of like you get this premise for a thing, but it's very well executed. It's like a funny idea that I thought they did very well.
And then at the end of it, he's like he gets a page or something. He's got a case in L.A. at 3. I don't know where he is right now, but he's got to get to L.A. The judge holds him in contempt, but then he flees and tells his client John Kennedy, he's like, "If you had any brains, you'd come with me." And then there's a shot of a jet flying away, and the line is something like, he seemed overworked, but he's really just greedy.
Yeah.
And then we get the first part of the Sammy Maudlin show, which I believe we've mentioned before.
Yeah, for years and years, I had absolutely zero idea that this was based on Sammy and Company, the Sammy Davis variety show that we kind of explored a little bit as a result of doing Poor Devil. And yeah, so I kind of looked at this a little bit differently after seeing some clips of that show and watching this because I think it works, just as like a parody of show business in general, but it's kind of funnier to me to know that it was based on something like a real thing, actually.
Did the real Sammy have a sidekick?
I don't think so.
Okay. So Joe Flaherty's playing Sammy Maudlin, and very solicitous host. John Candy plays William B., who is his William B. Williams, by the way. His sidekick, who's even more, butters up the guests and Sammy even more. And John Candy just does a laugh.
Yeah.
And he has the Ed McMahon sunglasses. But I guess it just seems like a blend of different sidekicks.
I think so. A lot of time, I didn't really care for the Sammy Maudlin show either as one of my recurring things. A lot of times I thought they went on a bit too long. And I think they would have like the Lola Heatherton character on here, which I didn't really get into that when I was first watching SCTV. But what they do with this a little bit later, that I enjoyed the second part of this more than I did the first part.
The first part involved, it's already in progress, and they have Joan Embry from the San Diego Zoo, but she's drunk. So Catherine O'Hara is playing her, and she's swearing like a sailor, and gets into a wrestling match off stage with a Tasmanian devil, and then William B., I think, shoots her.
Oh yeah, I think
in the
so.
arm. I mean, I enjoyed it. It's a different way to see Joan Embry, but
yeah, and probably a lot of our listeners, they don't need to be told this, but Joan Embry was a fixture on the Tonight Show, one of the most famous talk show guests at the time, and this is the kind of this is exactly the kind of thing that I think 40 years ago I would have loved this a lot more, and now it's funny. But it's just, we've seen so much stuff like it. It's not as unique as some of the other stuff, so it doesn't quite have the impact that I'm sure it did back at the time. So I probably would have given it a lot more credit back then. It's still, like I said, it's a funny idea. It didn't hit me as much as a lot of the other stuff in the show. But
I enjoyed Sammy's, not just the usual talk show host being a little uncomfortable around the animal, but when she brings up the Tasmanian devil, he just keeps going on. Oh, I heard they're really dangerous.
Yeah.
Vicious or something like that.
She had mentioned like these baby animals that she had for them, and then she slips in like Tasmanian devil. He's like, Tasmanian devil.
Oh. And then we had a commercial for something I don't care for. Maybe you'll be able to explain it to me, but these recurring characters, Tex and Edna Boyle's Prairie Warehouse and Curio Emporium.
I can't really explain it. I'm assuming it's just like a characters are just a general parody of, kind of low rent advertising that would appear on a station like this. But these characters never really clicked for me in any of their things.
So like Dave Thomas is playing the guy, and he's playing an organ, and Andrea Martin's playing the Edna, and she's like, yeah, very bad at doing the voiceover and talking about you can get all your Badland needs, and I mean some of the things are kind of amusing, but it didn't quite work for me.
But it was pretty short though, so no biggie.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's a bumper promo for Brian Johns visits Night Lady publisher, and we'll see that sketch in a little bit. And then there are a couple bumpers, and then there's a commercial for dog food called Puchari, which is like a hip 80s European dog food. It's dog food. It's now Puchari.
Like, yeah, this new wave Euro 1980s kind of commercial. The look of it was perfect. They nailed it. It's just like a visual triumph to me. The whole thing of this is that they nailed the look of this and totally did what they meant to do, I think.
Yes. So Eugene Levy's in like a turquoise jumpsuit with geometric designs on it, and he's got a visor, and it's like doing a weird, robotic movements, and just the idea, because if there wasn't something like that then, I bet there was, but like, and even now there are, like, giving pet food like this cool pizzazz, like that'll make it better somehow.
Yes.
What? It's dog food. The dogs don't care if it's cool.
Total example of style over substance, which was endemic.
But the idea that it's gourmet cat food or something.
Yeah, right.
A cat doesn't know. I mean, I know they're picky. They can be picky eaters or whatever. But yeah.
They can be finicky. One might
finicky,
say.
Yes. But yeah, that's a lot of fun. And then we go back to the Sammy Maudlin show, and actual Natalie Cole, performs a song called "Nothing But a Fool," which I guess was an NBC thing. They made them have musical guests. But then I like it. They incorporate her into the sketch.
Yeah, it seems like they did that when they could. In a practical sense too, it gave them some extra way to fill an hour and a half. So there's that. It does seem a little bit weird, but this is one good way to utilize a musical guest and not make that musical number seem as out of place as it would normally.
And she plugs that she's doing the theme song for different folks.
Yeah, I like that too. That's another nice bit.
And then their next guest, this is who I was referring to earlier, DeForest Kelley comes out, played by Dave Thomas. I'm not 100% sure it's a great DeForest Kelley impression, but I really like what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like, it seemed like a mix of DeForest Kelley and maybe Kirk Douglas or something. Also, I think you'll agree with this. The combination of the look of Dave Thomas's face and the fake eyebrows and the wig, he looked a little bit like an older Gary Sinise.
Whoa. Okay, that I've got to have to go back and watch that again.
Wouldn't you like to see Dave Thomas do a Gary Sinise impression?
Boy, would I ever. Okay, I'm being 100% sincere. Say that.
Yeah,
I would. We would love to see that. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I think you're onto something there. I'm gonna have to watch that again. I didn't hit it at the time, but yeah, there's something there. It's Gary Sinise and DeForest Kelley, even like sort of that like undercurrent of anger and aggression.
Right. Yeah, and he's definitely playing him as angry, and he's there to promote a movie he's done, a biopic of Julia Child, where he plays her husband. And right before they go to a clip, and he's like, yeah, they're like, do you want to set up the clip? And he's just like, they're not idiots. A cabbage rolls out, and he's like, oh, this is a strange show. And so they show the clip, and so John Candy is playing Julia Child, and DeForest Kelley's playing the husband, and he gets all flustered, and he can't open a cabinet, and he's having all these problems, and he asks Jim to beam him up, and
yes,
she starts laughing at him, and then they come back, and he's like, that was supposed to be cut. But Sammy and William B. and Natalie Cole have all been zombified by the cabbage. And then they cut to Guy Caballero watching it and commenting on the low-key performances.
Yeah, that was a funny comment.
And then we get this Money Talks with Brian Johns. So is this the guy you were thinking it was based on someone real? Or
No. The other one was definitely a Martin Short like an interview thing. I don't know this character if it's based on anything real. The character is funny, but I don't.
Yeah.
I guess it was a recurring thing, but I don't know where this comes from.
Yeah, he's just an awkward
Yeah,
man-child kind of nerd. I mean, just the beginning, like it has like a version of the song "Money," not the Pink Floyd, but the other one, like a weird cover of that. But he's like sitting sideways by the logo, and there's something weird about that. I don't even know why he would be doing that, but he's he talks about it. He went to New York to visit this Hannah Claire Graham, played by Catherine O'Hara, who's the publisher of Night Lady, a sexy magazine, and she explains in her swank apartment that her philosophy is do it. And he's like, oh, so you try it, and she's like, yeah, you try it. I forget the exact phrasing, but it seems like she might be implying something else.
yes,
But that cause she came up with that philosophy when she blossomed into womanhood.
right.
And then they go into bedroom, and there's like a guy, or well, she has him put on like a nightshirt or something, or a caftan. I don't know what. Then they go in the bedroom, and there's a guy lying, beefy guy lying on the bed, and she's like, "I'm gonna go get the oysters." And
Yeah,
Brian Johns gets on the bed, and they're just chatting, and he's like, "Oh, what do you do here?" And she pays me, and then comes back and rattles off all these statistics about, again, cover your ears at 2 to 11-year-olds, but how many women who've taken surveys with the magazine and certain sexual fantasies they have, and even how many are interested in menage a trois. And then there's a abrupt cut, and he's in a hot tub with her, and she's like, "Would you be more comfortable wearing trunks?" And he's just sort of like, how much does a thing like this cost?"
yeah,
Which seems to be his main interest because it's a money show, I guess.
right.
And then she asks the crew to leave, and they shut the door, and then it goes back to the studio, and Brian is like, "Well, I almost got seduced." I don't. It's very weird.
It is. It's a little bizarre. I think it's a pretty good send up of like Helen Gurley Brown and Cosmopolitan and all the inane surveys they would have and things to justify article ideas. But to me, it probably would have been a little bit better. It could have just ended right after without the hot tub thing, and it didn't really work as much for me again as some of the other ones. But
And then there's Moranis again, and it's an American Express commercial where he's playing an artist who's a real artist I didn't know about, but Henry Moore, who did these kind of sculptures with all sorts of holes and stuff in them, and they use sort of blue screen or whatever to put holes in him.
yeah, I had to look up the Henry Moore. I didn't get that at all. I mean, you can sort of realize that that's what they were going for. Again, probably would have been a lot more effective in 1981.
Yes.
It's still kind of funny now but Henry Moore isn't exactly a household name
No.
these days.
And then we get a scene of Bones, as they keep referring to him, and Guy Caballero, and he's explaining that he thinks aliens have taken over the station. And so they break into Hank Bain's office, and they find the ham radio and grab Hank, get a tease for something called Steeplechase, which I kind of want to see that too. I don't know if they ever did it, but
It showed up in my recommendations,
okay.
so it's a real. I didn't watch it yet, but it's a real thing. Yeah,
But you see a bunch of people it's a game show, but they're like in the opening gates of a horse race kind of situation. So I can't imagine what that's going to be. And then there's a commercial for Dr. Schechter, also starring Rick Moranis and Eugene Levy, and I'm assuming a chiropractor commercial, but it's a parody of the famous the Dr. Pepper commercial.
yeah. I love this. I think this is the best. Unless I'm missing something, this is my favorite commercial parody in this episode. Got in and out. The style, the look of it, and the music and everything, and it was well executed. And just the concept of having this kind of ad for that kind of doctor, I thought was really funny. So I really like this one.
Yeah, I did too. I figured you would because I know you're a John Naughton fan. What is that his
David
name?
Naughton, yes. Of course, yes.
Uh,
And just seeing Eugene Levy bouncing around like that was pretty good.
yeah, it was a good again, like you said, like sending up like a couple different things at once.
Right, right.
And then the rest of the show is kind of wrapping up this Uber plot with Zontar and all of that. And so Hank, there had been a scene where he had contacted Zontar and arranged this communicate over this big screen TV. So the three of Bones, Hank, and Caballero go in, and they do that. And Zontar, who's John Candy, and he's bald, kind of looks like Ming the Merciless, is upset because they haven't taken control of those two guys. So he blows up Hank Bain, and that's when Big Jim and Billy Saul just pop up from behind the couch and like, oh, he blowed up.
Yeah, that was a
Real good.
nice little cameo there.
Yes. And then Zontar explains that he wants to the planet Zontar needs television entertainment, and he wants them to send people there to make a 9-show cycle with 3 best ofs.
The specificity of that was hilarious.
Yes. And then, but Bones, they consult an interplanetary almanac, which Guy Caballero has, under a New Yorker.
Yeah, like and like doesn't like Bones ask him, "Do you have an interplanetary almanac around here?" It's like, yeah.
And they look at it, and it turns out a meteor is about to hit Zontar, the planet, destroy it. And Zontar is not happy about that. But and he's consulting his astrologers, and they're agreeing with him. And then the planet blows up, and the planet, by the way, looks like a cabbage.
Yes.
And then Guy gives this big speech about how you should watch television in moderation.
Just the concept of that is funny to me.
Yes.
There's foolish, outmoded ideas.
Right. And I think it's one of those things where he stands up from his wheelchair.
Yeah.
And then he ends it with, keep watching the skies.
Yeah.
And then there's like the end, and then it cuts to a sandwich in space and says, or is it?
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of sandwich it is. I mean, it's like a hoagie or a submarine sandwich kind of thing. But there was reference to corned beef and cabbage sandwiches earlier, so that's what it might be. I don't know. Anyway, and all the people are restored to their normal behavior. They're no longer possessed now that the planet's gone. So that's Zontar with Bonar Bain.
Bonar? Oh, no, I already asked that. I enjoyed this. I like the fact that, that they would do things like this every now and then. Like you got the whole structure. You're a TV station, but they went like to these absurd extremes with that and turned it into something, parodying like old sci-fi movies and all this stuff. And again, this is something like the very premise of this. Again, we're talking about something that's 40 years old would probably be even fresher and even funnier back then. I do think it's really good, as it is. I really enjoyed this. I like the way it played out over the course of the show, with segments in between. And I thought it was a good move to have DeForest Kelley, Star Trek connection aside, just have this celebrity get actually involved in the plot and help sort of foil it at the end. I just thought that was very amusing. So I really like this one.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, I think for everything you said and the TV commentary, and I really admire all the oddball impressions that they choose to do. DeForest Kelley, outside of the context of a Star Trek parody, is not something you would see normally. And of course, we both love Dave Thomas's Bob Hope impression.
We do. I was going to see if you could guess this, but Dave Thomas's Bob Hope is the one like SCTV thing that always gets me. Like no matter in what context, there's something about it that is probably my favorite thing about SCTV. I just love and the different things they did with it. Something about that is one of the funniest things of SCTV to me. So that's one of the characters that unfortunately was not in this, but one of the best things about Dave Thomas is Hall of Famer for that, if nothing else.
And there's like a Christmas episode, which was one of the ones Dan had suggested, and I watched that last night. And like in the middle of it, first there's a Sammy Maudlin where he interviews Neil Simon and Marsha Mason, and so Dave Thomas does just a Neil Simon impression. What? And it seems like it's a pretty good. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of Neil Simon interviews, but it struck me as good. And then they show the movie they're promoting, which is called Nutcracker Suite, which both Sammy and William B. thinks is the funniest thing ever.
Neil Simon's Nutcracker Suite.
Neil Simon's Nutcracker Suite, starring Judd Hirsch, Marsha Mason, and Alan Alda, Maggie Smith, Michael Caine, and James Coco.
Ah, yes.
So it's Eugene Levy is Judd Hirsch, Andrea Martin is Marsha Mason, and Joe Flaherty is Alan Alda, and I think Dave Thomas is Michael Caine, Catherine O'Hara is Maggie Smith, and then John Candy is James Coco. Just Michael Caine is the only person in that group of people that you would think of people doing impressions of.
Right.
And putting them all together in like this 15-minute parody of Neil Simon movies, which of course is about a writer trying to write a play for his wife. That was great. So I've thoroughly enjoyed this look at SCTV.
Yeah, I think I would have to say as far as in terms of this episode, Rick Moranis would be my favorite. Like everything, pretty much everything he did was a winner for me, and that's not to denigrate everybody else. Like I think a couple of the people in the cast that I really like Joe Flaherty. I think I like him better as other things rather than Guy Caballero. And this time he had plenty to do as Guy Caballero, but I love the Count Floyd, and I think he's one of the more underrated TV performers I think of the era. Like he didn't have like the big career afterwards, but he's so good on so many things on this show. And this particular episode wasn't necessarily as big a showcase for that, but I want to give him props. And I'd say the same thing about Andrea Martin too. I think she's really good, and like I said, I love that Mrs. Falbo sketch. She didn't have a whole lot else to do on this one, but again, one of the greats from this time period.
Yeah, I can't really argue with any of that. I wouldn't have. I guess I wasn't thinking that Rick Moranis. For some reason, I was thinking he wasn't in a lot of stuff, but he is.
Like even like the appearance, directing the different folks thing, and actually we didn't mention it, but the Jerry Todd, his Jerry Todd character was at the end, and just he comes in doing that voice just for a couple of minutes, and even that was funny.
Right, and he's zombified, but totally the same.
Yeah, yeah. They ask why he didn't.
Yeah, I feel like I said, I agree. I don't. I'm not really into the Guy Caballero as much as the show seems to be, but I really like Joe Flaherty, and I think I've grown to appreciate him more. Of course, he was one of the fathers on Freaks and Geeks, and he was really good on that. But one thing Dan had told me before is that Joe Flaherty's secret to playing drunk is to try not to play drunk, and he's right. You watch him, and like sometime when I was watching clips before, like I watched a bunch of those Five Neat Guys.
Oh yeah,
Which is like the kind of like a doo-wop band, or not even a doo-wop band, but like a harmony group.
mm-hmm.
They're reunited, and they have all these very saccharine songs about dirty things. But when you watch those, like he's like just barely like swaying, trying to keep his composure, and it's
Yeah.
hilarious. Or the Leave It to Beaver, which is one of the best things ever. I don't know if you've seen that one, but
I don't remember that one. No.
oh, that's
I'll have to.
he's Ward, and he and John Candy's Beaver. I'll leave it at that, but it's a very dark take on
Okay, I'll add that to my my
Leave It
list.
to Beaver. Yeah. So yeah, he's great. I think I've been up and down with John Candy before. I haven't seen a lot of his.
I think I appreciate him more on like SCTV, and at the time I didn't really I didn't get him as much in his movies. So yeah, and this wasn't really a big showcase episode compared. I guess he was Zontar. He was funny as that, but some of his like more well known characters like Johnny LaRue has kind of like a cameo in this one. And some of those sketches with him are funny, but I think there's some of the ones that go on a little bit too long. And in general, to me, like the best of the SCTV stuff is usually like more quick hits. And sometimes some of the ongoing extended things that go on for like as many like 15 minutes or something, I'm not as into those ones. Some of the things with like Bobby Bittman and some of the longer Sammy Marlin shows and the Johnny LaRue things, I guess I just generally prefer like the showbiz parodies and things like that. I think they're elevated, like I said, by the fact that they do these like melding things. So the more specific ones, as opposed to like the more general showbiz type, those recurring characters. I think that's what I like more about the show. But that's just me. A lot of people might, I'm sure, love the characters even more than we're talking. But
We'll mention this too because, well, one, give Tony Rosato credit for there's a Midnight Express episode, and he does a really good Lou Costello on that.
okay,
That's all I know about him, really. But then there's another parody, sci-fi parody one where they do 2009 to Jupiter and Beyond.
hmm.
The cast on that is Ernest Borgnine and Simon and Garfunkel.
Ooh.
Eugene Levy is Ernest Borgnine, and he's got some really good Ernest Borgnine makeup. I'm not sure. It's another one of those impressions. Like, is this a good impression? I'm not sure, but like he just says everything like this. But he's got a big belly, and it just. And then Flaherty is Garfunkel, and Martin Short is Paul Simon. And really, it's more a parody of that the sort of like Planet of the Amazons kind of idea.
Hmm.
I guess it was a full segment of a longer episode, maybe. I don't know. It's like 20 something minutes.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, a lot of great stuff to dig into, but it's just with SCTV. I think in general, people would say And Dan gave us like a ton of ideas. Dan's kind of pretty hardcore fan, but a lot of people would say, "Oh, how about the?" They'd recommend sketches more than like specific episodes would stand out. I would guess, but this is a good an example of a concept like a high concept episode that really worked. So yeah, it's very enjoyable, and there's a lot more stuff I'm gonna dive into. You give me a couple of ideas for stuff already. I think one of my favorite things the Merv Griffin Andy Griffith show. I love that one. Just so much stuff like all the Count Floyds. I love that character. One of the funniest things I've ever seen, that I remember seeing this a long time ago, was I think it was a Jerry Todd show skit where they show Michael McDonald recording his bit in Ride Like the Wind, and it's just a short, kind of a silly thing that always makes me laugh. So we could go on, but what a great show.
Martin Scorsese's Jerry Lewis live on the Champs-Élysées, whatever, the French. Oh, it's Martin Short as Jerry Lewis, of course. And, it's just it's like the trailer for him doing a live performance in Paris. And there are like a lot of wonderful, like sort of incongruous things, like him, doing this serious Jerry while wearing a sailor suit, yelling at people and things.
I guess I'll recommend, we'll put a lot of this stuff in the playlist. That's one good thing is, for whatever reason, it's tough to find like full episodes because of like music and various rights and stuff like that. And some you can find some full episodes, but not all of it's made its way to DVD, and a lot of it's probably long out of print now. But for whatever reason, you can still find a lot of it very easily online, and it seems to be staying up that way. So pretty much any like specific thing that you're looking for, I imagine you can find it. If it's not like a musical performance or something directly related to music, I'm sure you'll be able to find it pretty easily. But the one thing I wanted to mention, because I watched this again just the other day, was it Play It Again, Bob, with Rick Moranis as Woody Allen working with Bob Hope. It's a takeoff on the movie Play It Again, Sam, and just everything about that is that sketch is so funny. It's one of the best sketches I think I've ever seen. It's all together. So that'd be my last recommendation for that, I think. But
all right, just recommend if you enjoy what you hear and you're not already part of our Facebook group, consider joining that. We have a lot of fun talking about TV, and I imagine this particular episode will lead to some fun discussion there.
I know we've got more than one big SCTV fan in the group, and
yes,
I'd love to get a discussion going about what people's favorite sketches are, and maybe we're wrong on some of our opinions on this. But yeah, join us and let us know.
Maybe Eugene Levy's hair back then was not off-putting.
I'm going to stay neutral on this for now. I'm still, I got too many things to process here. I got to go back and look at the Gary Sinise DeForest Kelly connection before I can move on to Eugene Levy's hair. So that's something we can discuss on Facebook maybe. But
yeah, please let us know. Let us know things we should watch and all that. And if anyone knows the correct pronunciation of Bonar, we're glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Or maybe someone, I don't know, had an interaction with him. Seems like that would be more likely than Conrad Bain.
Because Conrad Bain was so inaccessible in this era.
Well, he was just a big
star. Yeah.
From what I can tell, Bonar Bain's most of his work was playing twins to Conrad Bain.
Yeah. I wonder if Bonar Bain, they probably both missed the nostalgia circuit, sadly. They if they had been 10 years later, they might have had a lucrative post-acting career, going to conventions as each other.
Yes. Like Conrad Bain would just hire his brother to do all of that for him. I'll stay here and count money.
This episode brought to you by Larry Basin, starring Waylon Burr as Basin, Patty Duke as Bella Sheep, and Hank Bain as Fall Drake. This episode also brought to you by the Dannemora Prison Choir. This episode also brought to you by cabbage, everyone's favorite vegetable. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.